would you now tell them, stop the avocados, stop the olives, stop the nuts and seeds? No, if they're trying to get their blood
No,
sugar.
none of that. I would tell them to watch their saturated fat intake. And I sure have seen plenty of vegans who are chugging down coconut oil from one source and another to boost them up. The way it works is, in my book, Diabetes Breakthrough, explains this carefully, and also an academic paper I wrote on it, that the saturated fats prevent the blood sugar from getting into the cells where it's needed for energy and keeps the blood sugar in the arteries where it can damage the eyes and the brain and the kidneys. And this is something that I think mainstream medicine has not really embraced. Yes, it's a good idea to eat slow releasing carbohydrates, and the test of that is their glycemic load. And one of the sad parts about modern medicine with diabetes is they say no fruit because fruit has sugar. However, the low glycemic load fruits like apples and pears and berries of all kinds are very low glycemic load. They do not increase spikes in sugar, and they're very protective against the damage from oxidation and glycation that happens with diabetes. So it's a several pronged approach. You want to keep those fats again under 12 grams per day. You want to eat lots of low glycemic load fruits. Notice, do not use glycemic index, it's very inaccurate. And then you also want to eat slow releasing carbohydrates like whole grains, but I mean really whole grains, not where it says whole grains on the front of a cereal package.
Okay. Victoria and Kim, do you want to talk about whole grains in a plant-based diet and dispel some of the myths about carbohydrates?
Sure, I can jump in with that one because I know that's a question I get all the time, is people telling me, oh, I can't have all grains, it's going to spike my blood sugar, and I have to do the same thing, explain, like Dr. Blake has said, that it's not the carbs, really, it's the fat. If you bring your fat down, then you're not going to have quite as much issue. But really making sure that they're whole grains, and really explaining what that means, and eating closer to intact whole grains, so steel cut oats and old-fashioned oats, and limiting the flours and the breads, and making sure that they're 100% whole grain, and reading labels and things like that. But the other part of the whole grains is people also talk a lot about needing to be gluten-free, and thinking they need to be gluten-free when they're not celiac and they're not actually gluten sensitive. But the whole gluten thing is kind of been blown out of proportion, kind of like the protein. It's just, it's marketing at this point. They're just trying to sell gluten-free junk food. So really kind of explaining that, like, well, okay, if you're not celiac and you're not gluten sensitive, it's not really bothering you, then do you really need to be gluten-free? Probably not. But just kind of explaining all of that, and taking, whole grains are just so healthy. The longest lived populations were eating whole grains and beans. And so, yeah, whole grains are definitely a go, and I eat them every day.
And there's lots of whole grains out there too to explore. We love to tell people to explore millet and buckwheat and all the different rices like Wehane red rice. And there's just so many great grains to explore, and lots of great beans to explore too, both of which would be looked down as carbos by a paleo or keto guy. But, and I sure agree with you that very few people are truly celiac or gluten sensitive. And a lot of people think they are, and it makes their life harder.
Thank
Yeah.
you. If anyone would like to ask a question, just please raise your hands, click the hand icon in the reactions tab. Victoria, were you going to say something, or should I go?
Oh, I was just going to talk about what people say about carbohydrates, and they'll say, oh, it's those carbs that'll get you, the pizza, the ice cream. And they're talking about food that gets most of its calories from fat, but they want to blame the carbs. And to try to gently walk someone through the fact that complex carbohydrates are the primary fuel for humans and other primates, it's really like having to undo a quilt and take away so many of the patches because they've been put on there for years and years and years. that carbohydrate is not an awful thing, and in fact should provide the basis of our diet.
Thank you.
You need a sage stick or something to make carbos clean again.
Dr. Blake, Brian Clement from Hippocrates Health Institute, Hippocrates Wellness, is one of the very few people that says the fruit today has been hybridized. It's too sweet. It feeds yeast, mold, fungus, candida, cancer. And he's very, very against more than none. He's saying none for people fighting a health challenge and 15% by weight for people that are healthy. So he's very much saying that the fruit is not okay. And then he's saying that Thomas Seyfried from Boston College has also said that cancer's fuel is glutamine and glucose. So all other speakers that I've asked have said they don't agree, and they think fruit is certainly a part of a whole food plant-based diet that's healthy. Brian continues to insist emphatically, he has the support of his wife and Gabriel Cousins, that the fruit is feeding these issues. I love fruit. I'd rather he was wrong. Do you have any thought on this?
Sure, of course. The trick is to look at the glycemic load of the fruit. And for berries, blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, they have a very low glycemic load. What that means is that if you eat a half a cup of these berries, your blood sugar will not go up much at all. And if your fats are good, they're going to get absorbed very easily. So no problem. Now, there are some like bananas that are heavily hybridized and very sweet. And it might be a good idea to stay away from eating much in the way of bananas if you do have some of these challenges where high glucose would be a problem. You know, I don't have a problem with it. But fruit is different, you know? A lot of people think that, well, bell peppers is a vegetable. No, it's a fruit, but it's very low in sugar. So is Brian saying don't eat bell peppers? What about cucumbers? They're not sweet, they're fruit.
He's okay with those two.
Well, sure. And we are, after all, primates, and fruit is what we're genetically adapted to eat. So it makes sense for us to eat those. It does make sense to eat organic fruit instead of fruit sprayed with insecticides. I really think that's a good idea. And it's a good idea. You know, you won't get all your nutrition from fruit, but for the brain, we want the anthocyanins in the dark purple, blue, red, black berries and grapes. And those really are wonderful for the brain. So I wouldn't want to cut those, but they're not going to spike blood sugar. So you have to look at what's going on. Also, you want to make a difference between eating an apple and eating an apple pie from a convenience store. The apple pie from the convenience store is just loaded with sugar. And remember those? But the apple itself is very low glycemic load, so no problem at all. So, and also dried fruit can be high in sugar, and fruit juices can be high in sugar. You have to be careful with those two. So the whole part is the important part, and certain of it, like mangoes can be too sweet for some people, and bananas, and there's a few high on the glycemic load scale, but the rest of the fruit is great, fantastic, very protective. Those carotenoids that I think Kim mentioned, are very protective, anti-inflammatory and brain protective. So there's so many good things in fruit, we don't want to throw out, you know, the baby with the bathwater.
And there is an interesting study, the Global Burden of Disease study, that looks at mortality and disability across various countries and ages. And they determined a few years ago that for the United States, the thing that we aren't doing enough of is eating fruit.
Okay,
Yeah, we used that in our last review on Alzheimer's disease.
Dorothy, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Yeah, hi. I'm Dorothy. I'm from New York. I have a question about the fruit. I think I heard Dr. Blake say that the glycemic index is not the same as the glycemic load.
Glycemic
And
load.
Yeah, and I know you, but I think you said the index and the load are two different things. And I've seen
Yes, they're two
tables
different
of-
things. The glycemic
Okay.
index is very inaccurate. and the glycemic load is the one you want to look at only.
Is there a table of, I've seen tables of glycemic index. I don't think I've seen one of load that shows you which fruits have higher or lower load.
Yeah, it's not the same at all. For instance, watermelon. If you look at watermelon, the glycemic index is really high because watermelon sugar absorbs very quickly into the bloodstream. But if you look at the glycemic load of watermelon, it's very low. Why? Because there's almost no sugar in the watermelon, and a serving of it does not raise your blood sugar. So forget glycemic index. It's a mistake. I know a lot of doctors are still using it, but I'm a nutritional biochemist and I really know the difference. And I've written books and papers on diabetes. You don't want to go with that index. It's inaccurate.
Okay, thank you.
Can you tell it's a pet peeve?
Just one quick thing just to clarify. Hearts of palm in a can, is there a problem with that? Is that just a vegetable or is there saturated fat in it? They're very satisfying and they almost feel like, I don't see anything on the can that says saturated fat content. So do you know anything about that? They seem like a really good, satisfying snack. Do you know anything about
What
them?
is it called?
Hearts of palm.
Hearts of palm.